I am extra joyful. How can you not be joyful after having a bit of a holiday? Like, really? Whoever comes back from a holiday grumpy? That'd be pretty strange, actually. And if I did come back grumpy, I hope you'd tell me to get lost, But coming back is a bit of a funny feeling. Galen, I've said, it feels like almost the first day of school. Like, what am I supposed to do? And it's a different feeling all of a sudden being back, which is a good feeling. I don't know if you've ever been to a church that you didn't usually go to for the first time, but it's something all of us should try to do sometime. Go as a newcomer. And, there's an old saying about hospitality. You're probably going to decide in the first 10 minutes whether you might ever come back, because most of us get caught up, as we naturally do, going to the same place all the time. And we get comfortable, and that's normal. So it's really good to shake it up, because when you are coming to a church for the first time, you learn a lot about a congregation. Like, does anybody even say hello to you? Does anybody even have a smile upon your face? Does anybody just recognize you or notice you? And believe it, as a preacher, I've been to a lot of churches. I've gone in to some of the smallest little churches in Canada, and nobody's talked to me. It's like, oh, well, this is a real friendly, Jesus people here. Yee-hee. It's funny. You knew I was going to slip this in somehow, but I was on a cruise, and I knew going on this cruise, I whined before because I said, I do not like the heat. It is, when you go to Greece and you go to the Mediterranean in August, you're expecting to get 36 degrees, feels like more than that. And so a day of excursions, and I have a partner I like to keep busy every day. And, I was looking for, where's the beer tent? Something to cool me down. But seriously, I come back on one of the days, and these companies, they know hospitality. And I know it was a fancy ship, the Celebrity, and they had cold washcloths all rolled up. And they took them with tongs, actually, and they put them on your hand, and you put it on your face. And I thought, I don't know if I've ever I felt that warmly welcome before. They had lemon juice and water. It's like, and then Nancy looked at me and said, do you imagine if I came home from work every day and you did this for me? You're welcome. Hospitality. It's something we often think about as a party and a good time, but really the biblical hospitality that Jesus is about is really about a way of life. It really is about a way of life. And so to try to put our heads around why is he getting a rough time in his hometown? I mean, think about Bianca this morning. I'm not a huge tennis follower, but I watched every second of that tennis game yesterday. Wow, Bianca. And I learned a lot about tennis, and, hats off to Serena. She's a legend, but boy, Bianca, 19 years of age, she wins the first Canadian ever, and just her confidence and yet her humility. And I bet you those people in Mississauga, forget Toronto. Mississauga people have to be pretty proud. This is their hometown gal, and Jesus was a hometown boy in Nazareth. And things were going pretty well for a while. They're hearing good things about this man. He's doing good stuff, 30-some years of age. And all of a sudden, though, they're hearing things about Capernaum where there's some special healing going on, and there's some special things happening. And some of the people that study these books of the Bible and these gospel writers, to know the gospel writers, is know that you got some real challenges when you have a Jewish Messiah that you're believing in, and other Jewish believers are quite skeptical. And, they really think that Jesus' hometown crowd, they were getting a little bit jealous of these Capernaum folks because it wasn't just Jewish people there were non-Jews. And you see, Jesus was showing hospitality to strangers. He was healing the people like tax collectors and prostitutes and people that, wow, were these the kind of people that his hometown people thought their religion was calling them to care for? Jesus cared about all people, and particularly about the outsiders. And that's why we hear that Jesus reminds them of God's love beyond borders in Elijah helping a woman from Sidon. Elijah healed a hated Syrian. And suddenly the Nazareth folks who thought this small town boy had done well, they got pretty fed up with him. And so as the story goes, they ran him out of town, or they're going to throw him off, maybe kill him. And yet mysteriously, Jesus slips away. Kind of reminds me of how Mary and Joseph just kind of slipped away to Egypt when King Herod was out after him. Jesus just slips away. And not long after in the Gospels, we hear that Jesus freed a man from demons. We hear that he's touching and healing lepers. We get a pretty clear message that when he rolls down that scroll from Isaiah and says, "The Spirit of the Lord has come upon me to preach to the poor and the oppressed," Jesus wasn't just talking. He was living it. And that living it cost him. And so, my friends, I want us just to think today about how are we living it with our own hospitality. And, this doesn't mean an extrovert like me necessarily is any better than someone who's an introvert. I'm recognizing more and more in my life, as I babble on sometime as an extrovert, introverts, they are recognizing, they're watching, they're maybe analyzing and noticing perhaps who's left out, who's forgotten. And sometimes extroverts like me are so busy just trying to welcome everybody, we miss something. So I want to share a little story with you to push you on a little bit of, to push you on the edge a little bit here. And I want to just highlight a couple congregations from the United Church Broadview. I still call it the Observer, but it's Broadview now. But just give a load of this. There's a congregation in the Netherlands. They're reaching out to refugees. And under Dutch law, police aren't allowed to enter the place of worship, so they're making sure that refugees are safe in their church. Oh, believe it up, Byron United in London, Ontario. They have 6 refugee families from Syria they've been supporting privately for the last 5 years. Oh, and there's a church in Winnipeg, Mennonite Church, and they are doing effective sponsorship, and they're supporting to match a family from the Vietnam. Churches after churches are doing what they can. We here at Trinity, we know every Wednesday night the Harvest Market is an outreach right into our community here for fresh produce and food. We know downtown there's countless ministries happening, whether it's Chalmers or maybe it's Hope House. And I know, Kendra, you go to Hope House pretty often, and if you go there, you know that you are supported and loved, and hospitality is the number one thing. But back to my story. Probably my funniest experience on my whole trip, and maybe the most memorable, I would say to people that swimming in the Mediterranean off an island called Argostoli, Greece, was a highlight for me because I never swam in the Mediterranean. And when you swim in the Mediterranean, well, it's even a little warmer than Sauble Beach or the Pinery. Like it's pretty warm, and it's salty, of course. But why I'm telling you this story is I definitely want to meet more Greeks in my life because I had the best hostess, hospitality, a Greek woman that guided us on this trip of Argostoli. But probably even more popular to me was the bus driver. And Gus, he had been a bus driver for many years, and when you're traveling, you start realizing the people who care for you really are pretty important. And of course, he didn't speak a lot of English, and I knew that he probably, as a bus driver, he probably did a lot of swearing. He was cursing a fair bit because people can drive pretty crazy out there. But what they never told us that when we were going to go on our little swim trip, we were at the top of some very high cliffs, and we were going to drive down windy road down to the sea. And I have a picture of it on my Facebook, I think, but it's beautiful. But, I would think on a typical day, you'd drive down on a bus, you'd probably be down in 10 minutes, I would think. But on this day, the people of Greece, they parked their cars all the way down this road. And so guess what? It's a one-way it's one way. And so we got the biggest bus with like 60 people on it going down, winding our way down. And wouldn't you know it, there'd be 10 cars coming up. Gus was, holy cow. Well, there was one thing for sure. He knew he was bigger than everybody else. He didn't even have to get off the bus hardly ever, but he just honked his horn a few times. And my friends, I didn't think we were getting back to ship. It took us an hour to get down to the bottom. There were a couple other buses down there. And as we would turn the corners, I was seated at the front, so he was a good time with me. As he would turn the bus and I would look over the cliff. I don't know if Jesus had it that rough. I was like looking down over that cliff. And he'd put his hand towards the door, like, look out at the sea. And I'm like, going, just drive the bus, for God's sakes. You've done this 1,000 times. This is my first time. And it's okay. We did get down. We had a great swim. And it was hot down there. Let me tell you, it was so hot. But we had our time. We did our swim. And then I just said to myself, okay, how in the world are we ever going to get out of here? This is like craziness, because when you've got 10 cars, they all got to back up one at a time. And so these Greeks, they know what they're doing, because all of a sudden when we went to leave, a guy with a whistle and a blue shirt and a guy in a little motorbike, they were coaching us all the way out. And they basically, I swore somebody was going to really be going to the hospital, because people would get out of their cars and think, I'm not moving my car for you, stupid bus. Get out of the way. But I obviously think somebody's paying the guy with the whistle and the motorbike, because they kept pushing the cars out of the way. And I looked at my wife and I said, this is humanity at madness. I mean, everyone gets down to the beach, but everyone's just trying to park. But I guess why I'm telling you this story is I was really pushed out of my comfort zone. I really probably don't like conflict, and I thought there was a few fights going to happen. And I thought I was getting off the bus maybe to be a peacemaker, because there were people out there. People get all... And, this bus driver does this every day. But it's really challenged me to think as I come back, after about 5 days on a ship, I'm ready to get off it. After I travel about 2 weeks, I'm ready to go home. I realize that I have a lot to learn about myself in terms of how comfortable I get. So I want you to think about that on your journey, how comfortable you get here at Trinity, how comfortable you get in your own journey of life. And you know what? I think the story that Jesus is revealing today is that we're supposed to get out of our comfort zone. We're supposed to meet people who are different. I'm supposed to go to the dog park in the morning and talk to somebody who loves Trump, and go to my dog park and talk to somebody who thinks, well, I won't go into Canadian politics, but as my son says to me every morning, I have to go to work at 6 o'clock and I have to listen to two 60-something-year-olds complain about certain politicians as they drink their coffee. And I said, what are you doing there at 6 o'clock? He goes, I have no idea, but they tell me to be there at 6. I got to listen to this stuff. Sometimes, we just have to, we have to be challenged, don't we? And so, honest to God, Scott will kill me for telling you this, but I'll tell you, it's funny that his buddies at work, I think he respects them dearly, he just doesn't agree politically. They said to Scott, well, of course you like Scottish bagpipes, because one guy's a Scot. And my son said to him, I can't stand the pipes. It's like got to be the worst sound in the world. He stood up and he said, I can't believe you're saying that. He said, you're only 22. What do you know? And he said, politically, I don't think you're a conservative. And Scott says, you better believe it, I'm not. I'm a Jeremy Corbyn fan. And good old Scotsman said, my God, that's as bad as being a Nazi or something. So it was getting a little heated. So Scott said, you know what? Sometimes we just have to agree to disagree. And I think whatever age we are, we have to deal with conflict, don't we? And we have to be pushed out of our comfort zone. And I do smile. Jesus kind of slipped away from that crowd. But he didn't just slip away. He continued in his ministry. And his ministry changed the world. Thanks be to God. Thanks be to God.